So I'm here with Tom Watson of Clinigen. So Tom, why don't you tell us a little bit about what Clinigen does?
Sure. So nice to meet you, Constantine. So Clinigen is a company that supplies pharmaceutical products globally on a licensed and unlicensed basis. And we're also a pharmaceutical services company. So the company is split up into three different operations. The first of those operations is clinical trial supply business, and we supply investigational drugs around the world, which provides us with a very global network. The second part to the business is a specialty pharmaceuticals side to the business, and we own our own products. We have 5 products currently. And then the part of the business which I work for is called Global Access Programs.
Interesting. So why don't you tell us a little bit what the Global Access Program is all about?
Sure. So a Global Access Program, I don't know if you know the terminology used of things like compassionate use, named patient programs, expanded access programs, managed access programs. There's a lot of terminology in the field of early access. Now we use the term global access almost to umbrella each of those terms.
So these are addressing patients who really have run out of options, or they're at an end stage of a disease and they're really looking for anything at that point to try to...
Well, what we're really talking about here is when we use the term early access, what we're really talking about is a mechanism to allow patients access to a drug prior to that drug becoming commercially available in their respective country. Now that could be for a drug that's phase 2, 3 of development, but it also could be for a drug where it has a license in a major market. Usually the US is the first country that approves a drug, but it's unlicensed somewhere else in the world. And then finally, certain situations, the client company tends to withdraw marketing authorization from the drug. And you can still, there are still patients often in those countries that require access to the product. But you are right in saying we are really talking about patients who really have no therapeutic alternative and they have a high unmet medical need. And these programs really are a way to provide access to those types of patients, often life-saving treatments.
Right. Well, that sounds fantastic. So how does this work? How does the program actually work?
Well, it's a complex area. It's certainly a complex area from a regulatory point of view. So we work closely with clients, both pharma and biotech clients, to make sure we design a tailored program for them. And we run over 40 programs now on behalf of pharma and biotech companies. Each one of those programs is extremely different in nature. But essentially what happens is if a patient in a country with a high degree of unmet medical need speaks to their physician knows about a product that's coming up in development, they have very few alternatives or no alternatives essentially, they can request make an unsolicited request for a drug to Clinigen, and if we're managing a program on behalf of a pharma biotech company who owns that drug, we can support them through the necessary legislation to be able to provide that access to that drug.
Interesting. And so is there a component of this program to clinical trials?
It's a very good question and an extremely important one. Most of the people at this meeting, bio obviously, are interested in clinical development and the usual traditional routes for gaining approval for a medicine. These programs are by no way supposed to replace the usual clinical trial development of a drug, and in fact they can run in parallel. But it's extremely important, and in fact we have an ethical obligation that if a patient can enter a clinical trial, that's the first port of call, and that's where we would direct a patient in the first instance. That said, as you know, clinical trials, there is sometimes quite strict patient eligibility criteria, and often patients fall slightly outside of that. And equally, there may be a patient in a country where the clinical trial just isn't running, and therefore geographically it's important that they still gain access to that treatment if they can't access the clinical trial. But certainly clinical trials are the priority for us and for all patients.
So how does a meeting like this help your efforts?
Well, I think Bio Europe and Bio US, from our point of view, is unrivaled in the partnering opportunities that it provides. Obviously, you can do a lot of prep before the meeting, which means that when you get here, you have lots and lots of meetings set up with people that are probably at the stage where they're able to collaborate with yourself. So from a partnering point of view, it's really...
So this is an opportunity for you to really generate awareness about the Global Access Program to a lot of the drug developers, I assume.
Exactly that, and this is not something that can be set up overnight, and we speak to companies who have drugs in very early phases of development, and we speak to them over many years. Many clients that I've been working with, I've seen over the years at Bio, and I've seen this meet and also met quite a few new contacts. So from our point of view, as I say, the partnering's great.
So in terms, if you were to project 5 years from now, how do you envision the Global Access Program at that stage? Will it be kind of ubiquitous? Will it be kind of a standard model for getting these newer drugs to patients who need them?
Yeah, I think so. I think this is it's an extremely topical area at the moment. I think there's been a few high-profile cases played out very publicly in social media, where parents of essentially dying children have undertaken large-scale media campaigns, which has brought it to the fore of many pharma and biotech companies. And I think the Ebola crisis in Africa is another topical area which is bringing the whole subject of early access to investigational drugs to the fore, really. I think my advice to pharma and biotech companies would be that this is something that they need to consider. There are benefits and there are risks associated with allowing access to a drug prior to that drug becoming available in commercially, but I think it's something that they need to think through. I think the main reason for that is if they have a drug that's starting to show promising results. We're in a much smaller world these days, and all the drug companies and biotech companies are focusing very niche areas: rare diseases, orphan diseases, oncology.
So it's a benefit for them to kind of identify these patients as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially these rare conditions.
Yeah, but it is quite an emotive area, and it is quite a sensitive area as well. It's not always the case that it's the right thing to do to allow access to a medicine prior to that medicine becoming available. But I would encourage pharma companies need to think about it and have a stance on it. Whether they're going to grant access or not, they need to have a strategy around that.
Well, that's fantastic. I mean, this program sounds like it's extremely worthwhile, and I wish you much success with it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
You bet. Thanks, Tom.
Cheers.